Hey mathematicians, so this past couple of weeks we've been solving very basic equations with just one step or two steps. Now we get to start with the really fun ones, the big kid equations. And don't panic, I repeat, do not panic. We are going to take each problem and break it down. In fact, we're not even going to actually solve any of the equations that are on this paper today because I am a lot more concerned, especially here lately, looking at some of your all's quizzes and when you explain your answer, I'm pretty worried that some of us, even if we're doing the right steps, we're not 100% sure why we're doing them. So we are going to take these equations and we are going to break them down into very basic step-by-step. So we're actually only going to get the first step of each problem done today. And I'm going to use this first page to explain where that first step comes from and why it works the way it does. So we have ourselves an equation here, and we have talked at length about how an equation is the same concept as a balance beam. So I'm going to draw like a really crappy one here. And what the equal sign is the middle of that balance. And everything that is on the left side of the equation goes on the left side of the balance beam. So let's start by building there. So my first piece of the equation is the number -2. We are perfectly fine with just putting in a little text box here to model the fact that you've got a -2 on the left-hand side of that equal sign. Then we have a -5a, which means that we have 5 a's that are negative. So the way that we would build a model of that, the easiest way I think, is just to make a little text box, and I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 negative a's, because this means that I have a's, 5 of them, but those are negatives. Then we have a +8 that is on the left-hand side of our equal sign or our balance beam. So I'm going to put the number 8 right here, and then I kind of made that side a little too small. I'm going to drag everything over here just a little bit. And then last but not least, I have a -2a, which means that I need 2 more a's that are also going to be negatives. So I'm going to put those 2 negatives right here on the left-hand side of my equal sign. So there's a lot happening, and we've only gotten half of this equation modeled. So if only there were a way for us to make this a little more simple than it already is, that'll make it a lot easier for us whenever we actually go to solve these suckers like we will later this week. And there's a great way that we can actually make these more simple. Because they're on the same side of the equal sign, we can combine like terms. So for example, -2 and +8 are like terms, aren't they? So if I were doing this on paper, first of all, it always helps me to kind of draw that imaginary line there to help me to remember that that is where the middle of the equation is. And, sorry, I don't know why this is doing stupid stuff right now. Let me just draw it like that. Not very pretty, but okay. So we know that because the -2 and the 8 are on the same side of the equal sign, and because they're like terms, they're both numbers, we can actually take this 8 and this -2, and we can combine them. We can put them together to make this side of the equal sign a little more simple. So I can just put in my calculator -2 + 8, and that is going to give me a +6. So I'm going to highlight that 6 in the same color that I did the -2 and the 8, because that is a good way to indicate that I know for a fact exactly like what I get when I put those together, when I combine them. And then I also have another pair of like terms, because I have a -5a and a negative 2a. So again, because that negative 5 and that negative 2a are both a's and they're on the same side of the equal sign, I can combine them, I can put them together. So if I had 5 negative a's and then 2 more negative a's, that means I have a total of 7 a's that are negative. So I'll add my little text box that says minus 7a. Remember, minus and negative means the same thing. So just like mathematical magic, we've now taken the left side of the equal sign of the equation and we turned it from 4 terms into 2 terms, a lot more simple by combining those like terms. On the right hand side, I also happen to have like terms. So let's see what happens if we add. So the first term that we have is a negative 6a. So that means that I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 a's that are all a negative. And then I also am going to have a single solitary positive a right there. So I'm going to put a positive a over here on the right hand side of my equal sign. And let's see if there's anything that we can do to combine those. We can, since those are like terms as well, and because they're on the same side. A positive a and a negative a, just like a positive 1 and a negative 1, are going to cancel each other out, which means that a negative 6a plus a positive a is just a negative 5a, because once those a's cancel each other out, I'm left simply with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 negatives. So what we've managed to do is take a pretty complicated equation that had a whole bunch of terms to it, and now we've simplified it so that it only has 3 terms. And that is our end game for today. We're not even going to go through and we're going to solve these things. We are literally practicing simplifying these equations and making them a little bit easier to work with. Okay, so I'm going to use problem numbers 1 and 2 to show you all we're going to do for today. And again, my goal is that I just want to make sure that you guys understand when you're allowed to simplify equations and when you can't. So I'm going to zoom in here on number 1. And you can see, oh, that's the opposite of zooming. So I have 2 pieces of directions. So one is to highlight any like terms that we happen to have on the same side. So I'm going to look at number 1. And I see that here I have no like terms on the left-hand side of that equal sign. But on the right-hand side, I do, don't I? I have a 7n minus 7n. So in the same color ink that I selected, I'm going to combine those to simplify. And then the minus 1 is just going to come down. But now that I have a 0, because 7n, take away 7n means I won't have any left. So 0 minus 1 means that on the right-hand side I'll have a negative 1. And on the left-hand side there was nothing that I could simplify. So I'm just going to leave it as is for now. So I've just done the second piece of the directions, which is to write the simplified version. So we're going to highlight and combine any like terms that we can. And then we're going to write the simplified version of the equation right underneath it. And they're not all necessarily going to be able to be simplified. So for number 2, for example, if you take a look, we've got 2 plus 4x on the left-hand side, which is not like terms. And then negative 16 plus x on the right-hand side, which is also not like terms. Even though these are like terms, they're not on the same side of the equal sign. So that means that I have done everything that I can do to this equation, so I'm just going to leave it be.